Hey everybody, Lewis Butler here with Simpleray. I'm the Director of Sales. And with me I have Tyler Anderson, the President of Simpleray. Welcome, Tyler.
Thanks.
So today we're going to be talking about power purchase agreements. We're going to give everyone another 30 seconds or so to get into the room here, and then we're going to hit it pretty quick and hard. We're going to be talking about solar financing solutions for nonprofits and businesses. Power purchase agreements are something that people hear a lot about. They may have seen one come across their desk at some point in time, but they're a good fit in some situations. In other situations, there's other financing solutions which are even better. And we kind of want to just talk about them in their most basic terms. And the reason we have Tyler on today is, Tyler's solar and the renewable energy field is it's a little bit younger industry than a lot of other industries. You think about the coal industry or the oil industry going back, decades and centuries even. You started Simpleray, formerly Iowa Wind Solar, in 2008. What surprised you the most over the last decade that you've seen change?
Probably the cost of equipment, actually. We were just running some numbers the other day, and there was like a 93% cost reduction in modules. I think that's probably the most mind-blowing. Yep. Kind of interesting.
And we'll get into it in a little bit, but just on that point really quickly, it's not as if any one year is a 90% jump. You just have this small gradual progress over time. And with increased module efficiency, it means less labor, less racking. So the savings on the module front actually, the equipment side compounds itself when we're looking at these projects. Is that a fair assessment?
Exactly.
Okay. So Tyler, we have one of our projects that we worked with a partner on here. This customer actually didn't do a PPA. But it was an option we looked at one point in time. It's we're really proud of it. It's a dog bone and a paw print. We did 2 colors of modules. But larger projects like this, smaller projects, nonprofits, we say, oh yeah, PPA is a great fit. In its most basic terms, what is a power purchase agreement, and why is it a innovative solution for some people?
Sure. So PPA, it's a power purchase agreement. It's really just a financing mechanism that's more useful for entities that do not have tax liability, or say corporate entities where they don't need to utilize those tax benefits or might have shelters currently in place. Most of the use cases very good for say schools, government entities, electric cooperatives, that kind of thing.
So, when I think about financing mechanisms in my head, I think one financing mechanism a lot of people are most familiar with is, say, like a car loan or a home mortgage, for example. And at the heart of it, financing a solar array is really no different, but there's just an extra piece. There's the tax liability and being able to monetize those tax credits. But then there's also just the payment for the money that's getting borrowed on the array. So let's see what you think of this analogy that I just thought of. Imagine paying for your car. Instead of having a monthly lease payment, you pay per mile driven, right? And with the solar array, you're not, the PPA, you're paying per kilowatt hour of electricity instead of having a fixed monthly payment. But at the end of the day, the bank kind of looks at those two things in the same way. We have a rough idea how many miles you're going to drive a year. We have a really good idea of how much energy that's going to produce. So what's the advantage of breaking it down like that if you buy into my analogy of miles driven and kilowatt hours there? Sure.
Well, part of it, the customer themselves or whoever's buying the power, there's a little bit more comfort there, I guess you could say, and knowing that third party is responsible for the actual production of the array, versus just a standard lease payment. In your analogy, the car could not work, and you would still have to pay for it.
Yep. So, and this is something we can talk about a little bit later, but the power purchase agreement, it's a very simple mechanism to say, this is how much you're going to pay for per kilowatt hour, and you can compare it against your current electric rate. So it's a nice, clean mental construct to think about it. And, would you say the developer, whoever is owning the array, are they more or less likely to make sure that array is working, I guess?
I feel a little bit more likely, I would say.
Yeah. From our side of it, we get to put our money where our mouth is at, right? So
exactly.
I had this table made up. It's not the world's most perfect table when we're talking about financing solutions. And at the top, you mentioned schools, municipalities, nonprofits are good fits for PPAs, Tyler. Can you say again why explicitly that is?
Mostly just because they don't have any tax liability.
Okay.
Would be a simple way to put it. They can't utilize, there's fairly significant tax advantages with buying a solar array, and having a third party kind of monetize those through this power purchase agreement generally pencils out better in the end.
So when you say, they can't take advantage of the tax liability, we're looking at commercial projects all day, every day. I know you're a pretty precise guy on the engineering front, but ballpark, what dollar value or actually percentage of the project can those tax credits and depreciation actually pay for at the end of the day of the total project?
Sure. It does vary by the state, but probably 50% I would eyeball it at.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
So a lot of those incentives, if you're just a school or municipality, you're trying to pay for that entire array and have the payback work out for you. It's kind of a tough road to go down if you're not going to be able to capture some of those benefits. And so we can help bring in a third party and buy the array, and it's someone who can use those tax benefits.
Right.
So up here, I probably have a slide that I don't know if I want to show the rest of the sales team this slide all day every day. There are some people who a PPA is not a good fit for, and I have it under my screen's over here. I'm pointing at it, but we have it under no tax liability and a really low cost of electricity. Why are some people just not a good fit for solar in that world, Tyler? What's preventing them from seeing those advantages? If I brought you a deal and I said they don't have tax liability and they're paying 1 cent per kilowatt hour, just talk me through why that's not going to add up for them on real simple level.
Sure. On a really simple level, it would just be that the PPA numbers themselves would be so high that it wouldn't make economic sense to enter into that agreement. It would just be cheaper to buy it from the grid at that point. It's just scale is very important with those power purchase agreements. So if it's too small of a project, it wouldn't pencil out nearly as well. Yep.
So, in my matrix, if you don't have tax liability, but you are paying a lot for solar, a PPA is actually a really good solution. And, one of those reasons, which I think I have on the last slide, is at the end of the day, we are involving a third party into these agreements, right? It's no longer Simpleray selling the equipment and our construction services and our engineering. There's now a financing piece. And can you kind of just talk through some of the extra diligence that's needed both on a project level and on the financier level that is going to add cost in exchange for, helping to capture, 50% of that value in tax credits?
Sure. I didn't quite catch the question there. What was that?
So I'm thinking, when we go and we find a financier or we're financing an array ourselves at Simpleray, there's extra diligence that's involved in our end or on the financier's end, and that adds cost. Can you just briefly touch on, how a power purchase agreement is actually a different animal than someone who's just going to pay cash up front and they do have the tax liability?
Sure. So a lot of those third parties do require additional studies, say geotechnical analysis. There's like some title work actually on the property itself. There's just a lot more diligence on the actual construction end, or a lot of additional boxes that we have to check that wouldn't otherwise be required, that are generally pretty costly.
One thing that surprised me is, when you're doing a power purchase agreement, the financier wants to monitor that station every single second of every single day. And so you might need a weather station to be installed. Like ballpark, how much is like a good weather station that might be required on a couple $1 million project?
You can pretty easily get 15 to 20,000 in kind of weather station and the metering setup.
Yeah. So, if you and I are out there every day and we're keeping track of it, that's one thing, and we own it, it's on our business. But you got a third party who maybe won't even see the array, they're just financing it. They do want that extra level of assurance that the array has been installed correctly.
Right.
So, we kind of talked about the electrical rates really helping out here. Can you, the tax credit's getting ready to step down from 26% to 22% to 10%. Why is that those drop downs of, it's only 4% or only 12%? Why are those drop downs going to impact PPA rates more than just that 4% or that 12%? They actually have an outsized impact on the kilowatt hour rate that we're able to bring to our customers at the end of the day.
True. So I guess at the end of the day, it's really about the return on investment that's required from the investor. So, even that 4% does lead to a fairly significant impact on the PPA price itself.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lower down payment is the way I think about it. It's 4% less than the investor gets to monetize in year one. Otherwise, they're going to have you finance that in the array over the next 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
So the slide I got up right now, Tyler, I know you're out on the road, you're helping get things installed. We're making a big push to the end of the year here. Is I think a lot of people, they see these PPA terms and, they might only see one iteration from a company. We try to be very consultative when we go out and we put together these PPA terms. So on the slide, I have term length, fixed and variable, introductory rates, site-specific challenges. I know this is like a very open-ended question for you, but, why does term length matter? Who would want a very short term? Who might want a very long term, for example? Can you kind of talk about how you can really morph these things to fit, an organization's needs?
Sure. I guess in general, the longer the term, the lower the actual kilowatt hour rate itself. It just allows the financier to drag it out over more of an extended period of time. So the overall cash flow to the entity it's actually fairly significantly improved, even going from a 20-year to a 30-year PPA. Those numbers, even in the early years, are there's a pretty big difference.
So a lot of time, if we see competitors' quotes on PPAs, they might have an escalator built in. They might have a fixed rate. What does that mean, and why does that matter on the financing side?
Right. So that is very important to consider. Say you had a PPA rate that just said it was 3 cents. There's a big difference between 3 cents fixed and 3 cents with, say, a 1.9% escalation rate. Let's see what else. Yeah,
I think about it as like a time value of money, right? So
right.
The higher that starting rate, the quicker that you're paying the financier back, the less interest you're going to pay over the life of the array. And so, there's some organizations who, if they're cash strapped today, but they instantly want to start saving money, we can offer a really low introductory rate. However, in year 5, 10, 20, whatever it is, that rate does need to go back up to pay the financier back. Or conversely, like in Iowa, there's PEPL money. You can't do a PPA with PEPL money in Iowa, but let's say you had another incentive program like the adjustable block program in Illinois. You can use that cash and pay a really high rate really early on and really lock in a low rate over the term, essentially because you're borrowing less money.
Exactly.
So, from our side, Tyler, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, as an EPC, we do the engineering, construction, and procurement. We really don't care how long the term is. Is that a pretty accurate statement?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to build the project. The term is really going to be driven by the customer, and in some ways, getting these PPA rates designed is just as much work and just as important as all the engineering and technical specs that go into all the equipment we're using and all the paperwork that we're doing on the construction side. Tyler, we've been working with a small scale utility lately. We've had some unique challenges. Can you kind of talk about those and some of the creative solutions that we're trying to get some of these projects off the ground? I think there's like a historical floodplain or something like that. And I think we can kind of talk about the problem without getting too specific here.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is located in a floodplain zone. And so it is, it's land that wouldn't otherwise be used, which is kind of nice. You're not taking crops out of production or anything to actually build the array, but there's definitely some design challenges surrounding that. We're considering building some levees. The most economical solution actually is probably just raise the array up another 2-3 feet. It actually, it penciled out decently well, even though it was in a floodplain.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, that might have an impact on the PPA rate, but really how good of a PPA rate people are going to get is really going to be driven by the site location as it's existing, how much they're currently paying for power. Sometimes I think there's a tendency when a project doesn't look good, maybe we can throw a financing product at it and it'll make it look better. But if the project looks good, if you're going to pay cash, it's going to look good with the PPA. If your project looks bad on day one, the PPA is not really going to save a bad project and make it look better. Have you ever seen the inverse of that, where a PPA really has saved a really ugly duckling, Tyler?
Ooh. Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. So that's all of my questions, Tyler. I see a question from Kathy. She wants to know if we assist with PPA arrangements for people that we work with, and the answer is absolutely. I see Shu Ting, who helps out on our financing and deals with a lot of financiers that we work with. I think we talked, I think there's like 100 different financiers we're talking to on a regular basis. And we have a couple of vendors we like working with. So we're constantly trying to get as good as rates as possible and negotiate on behalf of our customers. So finding someone who fits our customers' needs is definitely something that we're well equipped to do. And I'm going to go back to one other slide here to see if there's any more questions. We have PPA and I have short-term PPA. So, there's some entities that don't ever want to, I don't think beholden is the right word, but they really like to own things, but maybe they don't have the cash today to pay for the array, or they don't have the tax liability. And we short-term either PPA or loan structure that might be 7 or 10 years long. And so it's not a 20 or 30-year PPA. So while the cash flow might suffer immediately, long term, they're going to realize a little bit more savings because they're borrowing less money over time. And then you'll see on the left-hand side something we didn't really talk about today. If people have cash on hand and they have a tax liability, doing a PPA is really not a way to go, because you're just letting someone else get between you and your project, and you're borrowing money. So you can go to your bank, or we might be able to help facilitate something on the cash side, but a PPA is for, I think of it as it's a very specific is the wrong word, but there's definitely a clear box that PPAs go into, and then there's leases and solar purchase agreements and ESAs, and it's kind of mind-boggling how many acronyms are out there. Have I missed anything there, Tyler? Do you have a favorite financing structure out there, or any final words of wisdom here as we wrap up?
It's really just important to tailor it to each individual project and entity, I would say. There's a million different ways to skin a cat. It's just which makes the most sense to them. Even, I guess I would note, say on a corporate structure, if you had two entities that were related, and you had one that might not own that particular site, you could actually power purchase agreement between those two entities, kind of have an internal PPA. I might just throw that out there, but yeah, generally a very good financing mechanism for nonprofits and municipalities, and yeah.
So I think we'll sign off, and if anyone out there wants to get more technical and talk about the mechanics of tax equity flips, or they want to talk about different valuation methods of the fair market value at the end of a PPA term, there's a whole lot of details that go into these that we haven't even scratched the surface on. So you can head to our website, simpleray.com. You can send us an email, finance@simpleray.com, Lewis Butler at simpleray.com, Tyler Anderson at simpleray.com. Reach out to us, leave a comment, watch some of our other videos about safe harboring or wind loads or the impact of snow on arrays. There's a lot to know, and even if you're not in the Midwest in a state that we work on, feel free to give us a call. We're happy to help advise on your projects, or maybe we can solve one small piece of your project puzzle and help get it across the finish line. So thanks for your time, Tyler. I'll let you keep driving down the road, and thanks to everyone else for listening today. Have a great day.
Thanks.